I was recording earlier to test it, and I was recording, what do you call it? The Village People. What's that famous song, the YMCA one?
Right.
And I was recording that, but someone had put it in minor key, and it's fantastic.
Interesting.
Yes, very.
Yeah, Adam went on this like huge
Minor key.
stint on minor keys, and he just flooded my YouTube recommendations feed with it because the upstairs the computer in the Vive room, I'm logged into my YouTube account, and so whenever he puts shit on there, I just gets fucking algorithmed to my feed.
I have this issue every time I make a new video because I'm doing all this, I'm ripping all of these clips from all these different things on YouTube. And so my YouTube feed is normally wrecked for a couple of days until it finally is like, oh, you never want to see that again? Okay.
I make it a point to like manipulate the algorithms as much as I possibly can. So I have logged off that computer now, but like I would say about 65 to 75% of my Google searches are done in incognito mode. Most videos I watch, kind of the whole shit. Like I try my best to avoid the algorithms in places. Well, just because most of the things that I look up are extremely weird and eccentric and sometimes illegal. So
Sometimes.
Yeah, well, not everyone. How to make a bomb is not always available.
Society hasn't gotten there yet.
No, I would love for that to be on the front of something like Facebook without it being flagging me, whatever.
You're like a bath bomb, dude. A bath bomb.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
You know what? So I wish I was more like you, but actually to make the algorithm just do its job better. Because if I was smart, I would watch things that I was using for research purposes in incognito mode so that it knows I don't actually like 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah, no, I feel that.
Yeah.
I don't avoid, like, I will still deliberately, like, seek out and click on things that I want to while in, the mode where it's like, I want the algorithm to give me more of that. So I will, it works in both directions. I just have to do a lot of work to filter out the things I don't want. But I also do like it for the things that I do want. I do want it to give me, I like targeted advertising. I don't, I like, being marketed to personally as opposed to just having random shit thrown at me. So I don't know. That's just,
yeah, it's like logging into YouTube without actually logging in and just seeing what they normally suggest you. It's going to be a bunch of like late night TV.
Just and like it's going to be like, the X Factor or whatever. Just things.
Oh yeah.
Things that like no one. Well, things that I would never watch.
Trailers for like Hulu shows.
I was gonna say no one watches, but then like millions of people watch these shows.
Yeah, actually, the most people watch that. That's why it's on the front page.
Exactly.
There's got to be a word for that. I think I was having the same conversation yesterday about how even though I don't like Justin Bieber, he sells out stadiums. And it's not just that I don't like him, it's that no one I know likes him. And so you can get kind of caught up in this bubble where you think like, yeah, nobody likes blah blah blah, and it's like,
yeah,
the thing has like
actually
millions.
They're the most popular artist in the world.
For sure, right? Yeah, and in the case of someone like me, it's almost consistently that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll bet the Germans have a word for it.
They do, and I bet even though it's an entire concept, it's only one word because they're very good at that.
Very efficient, the Germans.
Yeah, is that what that is? Is do they have like is their language more efficient in general, like the construction of it, or is it just that they have more literal words for stuff? Yeah.
No, it's just you can just combine words together, and then that makes another.
Yeah, it's
word.
all just compound words.
Yeah,
dude, I noticed that recently because I was on Ask Europe on Reddit, and someone was asking about basically in German, lots and lots and lots of animals that were discovered within the last like 300 years. All of them have that's what their names are. Is just like bats are like Flugmouse, and so it's just like like flying mouse or like bird mouse.
What's that? That's a flying mouse.
Yeah, so the German word for thing that I don't like and assume nobody likes, but is actually really popular. The German word for that is just, if you translate that sentence to German and just make it remove the spaces, that would be the word for that.
Exactly.
That's the most wonderful thing ever. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
It's like that 27 letters long.
Right. Is that the breakdown for like Schadenfreude then?
I think those are two different words. I think it's like something like misery, laughter, or something. Something to that effect. Sometimes it's good enough just to aim near it and get like a vague closeness, like, I don't know,
Yeah, as long as it like approximates the idea.
Yeah,
wonder-
like
Huh,
horse
that's
like horse tornado for like merry-go-round would be close enough.
I
You don't
am
really
a
need,
fan of horse tornado.
you don't
Dude,
really need like more literal it's like people get what you mean if you
we
just
missed out on a naming convention for our podcast, man.
Goddamn, horse
Yeah,
tornado.
fucking horse tornado. That's a great But I am into Podantics. I think that's fantastic. Is that the official
That's good too.
pronunciation? I've only
I
seen it
don't
written
know.
so far.
It's not a real word.
Let's see. Well, you have pedantic, and so if you just do pedantics, but if you want to emphasize the pod for podcast,
Yeah, I
do
think you go
podantics.
podantics. Yeah.
I think you might be right.
Well, you don't want to say it too much like it's two words. You don't want to say pod antics because that's no fun. You want to say it as one word.
Which is almost what it is, though.
Which
But
is,
I do
yeah.
agree. Yeah, one word I think is the way to go. We're kind of we're a one word team around here.
I have to say a word that really, really drives me crazy, and it's kind of similar vein where like it makes no sense how it's pronounced to me, is the word autopsy. I feel like if you
Autopsy?
I beg your pardon.
What do you want it to be? Do you want it to be autopsy?
No, it's just the way you'd say like automobile or automatic. Why doesn't it just autopsy?
Because we put the emphasis on the
Oh, I see.
autopsy.
So
Why
I
is
see
it
what you mean.
autopsy? Like I don't
You
like
de-emphasize the middle
you
syllable.
give that word to anyone who doesn't speak English or hasn't, as a first language.
Yeah, they
and
wouldn't
say
there's
autopsy for
no
sure.
way, there's 0% chance anyone says autopsy. It just
I got
makes no sense to me, and it's a
I got a
stupid word.
dollar.
Well,
It
it's
has
actually
to do with, like,
it's
where
actually
the
a
country of origin
combination.
from.
It doesn't it's not using the prefix auto.
Oh,
It's actually a combination. It's a portmanteau of topsy and autism. So that's why it's pronounced that way.
You know what that actually no bullshit actually reminds me of is the like helicopter. People, I think most Americans especially would assume that that's a breakdown of hella and copter, but it's actually it's something ridiculous. Let me see what the breakdown actually is, because it's
Is it like helico and something?
yes, it is. I think it's helico and then pter or something
Weird.
ridiculous like that. Yeah. And so those kind of situations too have to do with like what root you're actually using or how the things actually broke up. But I think it is something like that. Yeah, it was like helico, and then just like the pter is just like a suffix or something from some other country. Especially because English, I mean, the difficulty. I wonder if the Romans had this problem too of like absorbing so many countries that you have all of this influence. Especially because with England, they had all those wars going back and forth. And so when like the Danish or whoever would get the upper hand, there would be like mergers and then they would start changing the language. Where with like America, we didn't adopt a bunch of Vietnamese stuff,
Yeah, it's because we were over there. They kind of got that. They kind of probably adopted our, it's because no one ever no one ever has invaded America.
So what you're saying is we need a war on U.S. soil.
What I'm saying is we should. This entire podcast is just my crypto. My crypto. I don't even know. Like is I don't know, Islamism. My crypto radicalized. It's a good word. It's just my crypto radicalized dream of invading the continental United States.
I think your only dream is that it's crypto.
Well,
no, I mean, yeah, your secret plot. It's funny because I've been thinking, actually, I was going to ask you guys too. I'm like, at some point, I just need to ask you guys to give me like a base run of like Canadian history, like the baby's first class, like 101.
I wasn't born here, so I have no idea. That's gonna be Scoot's territory.
You came here a long time ago, though, didn't you? I thought you came here as a young child.
14. I was 14.
Yeah, that's plenty.
Currently,
plenty of time.
Well, that's like ninth grade. You guys have the American school system, right?
Not in. Well, we do here, yes, in Canada. So it was in ninth grade, I believe. All I know is that it's kind of like America, in that European colonists came over, and the only difference is they didn't completely exterminate the local indigenous population. They only kind of half-assed the job.
Yeah, we killed some Indians, not as many Indians.
Yeah, and
that was
so
pretty chill.
They have more rights here.
Well, and if you had Indians,
4 more rights.
4 more. I assume that.
It's just an awful history of colonialism. Really, I mean, really, you don't really need to know the history of Canada. You just need to know the history of the history of every single country that's not Britain or the United States or France or Spain or Portugal. Is the history of the country that's lived under some sort of imperialist power.
It's almost your
That's
two options.
literally
It's
all
like
I'm
the
saying.
history is the history of someone who's lived under imperialism or someone who's been the imperialist.
Yep.
Yeah, those are the two.
Yeah, basically.
And all the cute little trappings and the quirks. Every country has its own little quirks of like,
So
they only massacred these people here, and they only harvested these resources, and we were left with a surplus of this, and now we're known for this. And so all little quirky fun facts of vestiges of imperialism.
Lately, I've been fascinated by the Eastern Bloc and all these tiny little countries no one ever thinks about, like Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan and this, that, and the other thing.
Slovenia.
Yeah, like
That's
they're
a
just.
good
I think they're
one.
interesting because they're so small that they could be their own. I mean, they were all under the U.S.
Well, it's so like Yugoslavia is so stupid, and you know what? Fucking come at me, you dirty Slavs. Okay, Yugoslavia is like half the size of our province, not our country, our province, like half the size. And then one day in 1991, they decided, hey, let's be 7 different fucking countries. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, but like
you're all the same. You all look the same. You all talk the same. You're the same. You're Yugoslavs.
You would literally get shot for saying that.
Absolutely. A Croatian would kill me. A Serb would kill me. A Bosnian and Herzegovinian would
forget the Montenegrins.
Shoot me. Let us never forget the Montenegros. And
that is not what I said.
I'm pretty sure that's what you said. The history will vindicate me on this. The North Macedonians, the Slovenians,
yeah, I'm looking at a map
did we
too.
do them all?
I think we got we're missing somebody.
Are we missing one?
Can we count Kosovo?
Kosovo's a country now. Yeah, it's not 1991, but now.
Yeah, I'm seeing they broke in 1991. Is that them going back to something that used to be that way?
I love, by the way, that we're going into the Baltic, the history of the Baltic region, because
geographic history of the Baltics.
So essentially, like after Slobodan Milosevic took power in, I think it was 88, I want to say, was when he was massacring people. But he was like before that, so it was like early to mid 80s. Like he took power, and then there was a breakup of Yugoslavia into Serbs and Croats, mostly along religious lines actually, but also along cultural ethnic lines as well. But the problem with drawing borders. The problem with drawing borders, which is actually kind of a larger problem of partition in general as a solution. This, by the way, I'm loving that this has gotten quite political because I enjoy this stuff. The problem with partition in general is that usually when it happens to a country, you're often having to negotiate with the partitionists. And the partitionists oftentimes are sectarians or otherwise quite extreme, loud.
Yeah, they're not really the people voices. You want to be working it out with.
Exactly, and so we end up always where in a partition where you have two different countries where the borders were drawn by people who don't respect the cultural ethnic boundaries, and so you have crossovers where just across the border you have people who are identical culturally or ethnically to other people or religiously have a lot in common, and so you'll always have this kind of weird strife that goes on in between. It's every time it's happened, it's going to be the same, whether it's like talking about Bosnia, obviously, in this instance.
Well, counterpoint Ireland. Israel. I mean, that's working out great.
Oh yeah, no, that's great. There's pretty much every example you can think of like partition is a situation where it is currently a problem, whether it's like Bosnia or like Korea, obviously, or even like Vietnam.
Yeah, like
Cambodia,
in what instance has that fixed
Ireland?
It? Never.
There's literally like no instances where partition has actually solved the problem.
When you use the word partition, do you mean something more specific than just the dividing lines between countries? Do you mean like
it's when you have a single country that has been amputated into two separate countries?
Drawing new borders within a country.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah. No, America seems like we're working on it as hard as we can. We keep getting threats from California and Texas.
You know what's ironic? I think after saying all that, like I honestly think that with America, the cultural and religious differences are becoming so stark that you are very closely entering a point where you might need two different countries.
What's hard about that is that
would be sweet. I would love the good half of the U.S.
The hard part is that the solution was supposed to be the states. And so the idea was supposed to be like this small national government where you had these states that were powerful enough to be like, hey, look, this state is super, what back then the dividing lines
Mhm.
would have been very different. But, this could have been the Catholic state versus the Protestant state or something like that. But we have become so homogenized, and every president vies for, well, especially because we love to do like the 1984, like, oh, hey, we have problems right now. So just for a little while, let me get more power than I should have. And then I swear to God, I'll give it back when I'm
Would
done.
totally give it back. We're definitely going to repeal the Patriot Act in
Uh-huh.
2003.
And then both sides vote for it every time,
Yeah.
that was a big, fiasco that just happened. So that's the thing, is that we keep having like bigger and bigger and bigger national power. To me, it's like offensive that we even have like a DEA. It's like there's so many things that the national government worries about that I think are very, very solidly like states issues, especially like drug enforcement.
Dick
Um,
Eating Association.
the Dick Eating Association for sure. Those guys, like if you want to eat dicks in Oregon, like let the
Yeah.
governors figure that out.
Yeah, let them handle that on a state level.
But for instance, like Oregon's been on fire lately, and like we're starting to hear people on the news like calling out for like the president to go and like arrest the governor because he's not handling it. It's like that literally is the kind of fascism that the point of
Yeah,
the
that's
states was to stop.
kind of kind of what we weren't looking for.
Yeah,
And
right.
also,
Exactly.
might I ask you, which side of the Civil War fought for states' rights? The South. You're welcome.
Yeah, that's true, right? I
Yeah, I
had a
don't
teacher
know.
put it
It's
really well. Said
obviously
states'
quite a
rights for what?
yeah, it's obviously quite a contentious issue. It's weird because it's not an issue that you see in a lot of countries, other countries, for example, like Canada. Like obviously Canada, we do have provinces, but a lot of them can be grouped into blocks,
Yeah.
essentially, with the, and maybe like Quebec would be its own little thing. But if you look at other countries like that are not Canada, even like France, for example, or I don't know. Yeah, like there's not that many. I guess Spain. I'm thinking of European countries here, but like obviously there are other countries where you have kind of a problem there, but not within just the administrative part of it, like
Hmm.
China and the United Kingdom and Russia, where they do have. I mean, they don't. It's not the stuff isn't administered on a state level. They're the problems with those countries obviously is that there are kind of sub countries or other territories that they're trying to annex or whatnot, and so there's a
Yeah,
separate problem there. I want to kind of like put a
Yeah.
flag there. It's a different problem. I'm talking about just governing within the country itself. The United States has a very strange model when it comes to this state
hmm
thing, because that's because I just think it's very weird because the argument that I hear is always regarding how the government is very bloated and can't do anything right, which is fine. But then why would you multiply that problem by 50? Right? Because it's not like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like if you,
Yeah.
because like, okay, yes, you could pass a single federal law outlawing, I don't know, abortion or something,
Right.
or allow, I don't, whatever. Let's just take that as a
No, sure. Yeah, that's
hypothetical.
a fine
Let's say
hypothetical.
you
Yeah.
could you can take a single federal law that outlaws abortion,
Hmm.
and that just kind of, well, you need what, like 300 people or something, 300 some odd people to vote for it, or against it, doesn't matter. You need basically one legislative body, or two if you count the Senate.
Yeah, no, as long as
Does
300 people, any 300 people sign a petition, then it's passed into law.
yeah, any legislative, you can take a single legislative body, maybe if you count the Senate too, but I count them as kind of one thing, and they kind of do
Mhm.
a vote on it, and that's going to cost taxpayer money because all you pay salaries to all those people at a federal level, and then it takes some time for them to do it. They have debates, whatever, and then they have a vote, and then it passes or it fails. You could do it that way, and that's going to cost a certain amount of money. But no one's going to tell me that it's going to cost less money to just
To
do
do
that
that on
50
50
times.
smaller scales, yeah,
Like
it's
that's
so
there's
dumb.
absolutely no
The
way. Like
argument
that's
wouldn't
good.
be.
So like from my perspective, if you want lower taxes, why not why not just amalgamate all of these like different states that you're doing all in one group? I think they already kind of do that, by the way, to some extent in some ways. But like, do Washington, Oregon, Montana, Colorado needs to all have individual laws pass abortion? Like not just abortion. Obviously, I'm using abortion here as an example, but every single little issue is going to have to go through every single. Like I get for some of them where you're going to need some clauses, and I don't think states laws are completely ridiculous because obviously even in like provinces here in Canada we have our own provincial bylaws, and you have municipal bylaws that you have to abide by. And but they're kind of, you have to scale them up. You can't just legislate absolutely everything through this kind of, through levels where, channels where it doesn't make sense to do it. I think there are some things where it does make sense for the federal government to make legislation on, and some things where it makes more sense for a smaller body to do it. The problem is with these kind of states' rights arguments that I hear is that people just want that for everything, like literally every single guns rights, abortion, whatever. Well,
I think
that police, every single thing has to be done through the states. And it's like, well, come on.
I very much so agree with you that there are some things that make more sense for the federal and some things that make more sense for state. So, for instance, I think that like war decisions obviously make more sense on a federal level because you don't want to have Gondor calling for aid every time, you know, it's like we get it, you know, 9/11 happens and then New York has to go ask all the other states, hey, will you join us, you know, to like defend, you know, this part of our country. So it makes sense there on a federal level. But I think like, for instance, like we have, I don't know what is like 13 states or something that have legalized marijuana, but it's still federally illegal. So that's a situation that if we were to just default to, you know, the federal situation, we would have maintained ever since 2013, we would still have weed be illegal. So those, and
saying,
what's that?
Be illegal is what you're saying.
Yeah, it'd be illegal.
Okay, but that all have but go on.
So point being though is that like for instance with the abortion situation, it's like yes, it would be cheaper to make one rule. The idea is that the benefit that we have now with the state system is that people who are anti or who are pro-abortion can live in you know, cities or states where that's not enforced like that. And then you have, you know, like they could live in California, New York or something. And then if you were on the pro, you know, or the pro-life movement or something like that, you could live in Texas or Alabama or something like that. And so that's kind of part of
or you could just live in California and not get an abortion yourself and shut the fuck up. That's also an option.
Well, what's hard about those kind of things is that most of the people, well, I don't know. All right, this is my opinion. In my opinion, most of the people who are anti-abortion are super religious.
Yeah,
of course.
It's hard. Yeah. So it's hard with those people is that there's not a bunch of like, that's a very pragmatic way to think about something that is like, I think it's gross. But if you think that people are murdering babies because the God of the universe created these people and had plans for them and stuff like that, like those people won't just shut up and be like, oh, well, it's cool. You like if we, you know, the three of us thought that like someone was murdering 3-year-olds in like a state, you wouldn't be like, oh, well, that's, you know, that sucks. Like it's whatever. You know, I don't murder 3-year-olds, but you know, they can murder 3-year-olds. It's no big deal.
But just hypothetically, what state might that be?
All right. Well, that's a big one because
asking for a friend.
I have this kind of conversation with a lot of my friends who have never been like around anything religious for a long time, and it's like you have to get in their heads. It's very different than the decision making processes you're making. You know, we're not walking around thinking that there's like an ancient elder god being who has designed like the perfect way for everyone to live, and that we have the answer and everyone else is fucking up because they're being lied to by the
Christian
evil
god. It's Cthulhu, and he's totally cool with abortion.
Well, right. Well, but what you just described is basically like the history of the world. Like as soon as we were smart enough to start coming up with gods, it became this nonstop like battle of the gods, you know. And it's like, well, my god says that we should blah 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 and kill you people and take your women, and then your god says blah blah blah. And
exactly.
You know, and now we're here, and this is about as far as we've
everything
made it.
Worked out.
Yeah. I mean, I think that obviously it is completely understandable for somebody to have a belief system which it is kind of moralistic, obviously. I mean, that's kind of almost the definition of a belief system.
Yeah, basically.
I don't mind that at all. I don't even mind justifying that belief system through religion. I don't mind. I think that makes perfect sense, by the way. And I'm a pluralist. I think that, you know, obviously as a Canadian, I think that everyone should be able to practice whatever they believe. But I think when it comes to legislating those beliefs, then you're running into kind of a different problem entirely. Like you can believe what you want, but there's absolutely no legal basis to justify it on.
Then you're just getting
no constitutional basis, in fact, there's no constitutional basis to justify it on either. But that's kind of the direction that a lot of people who have been misinformed, unfortunately, on this issue by a lot of right-wing sources. They think that it's okay to legislate because it's a Christian nation or what have you.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to open that can of worms, but you know, I absolutely think it's completely fine for people to believe whatever they want. But then you have to contend with something where it's like, well, if you believe that as a religious person, if someone believes that abortion is immoral, what if you have a separate religious person who believes that, I don't know, letting women get married at 12 would be immoral?
Because every religious person thinks that their religion is the only one that's right.
No, but like if some let's say hypothetically, I think this is why you have such a kind of an anti let's say it's generally xenophobic or anti-pluralist sentiment in the United States is because people realize that hypocrisy, and they go, well, if we let enough people with a particular set of beliefs that are religious conglomerate in enough numbers in an area that's dense enough where they can start electing representatives, then they can start legislating their religion, and we don't want that. But we still want to let so
I
what
can
do
tell
you
you
do
firsthand, you're 100% correct. That sentiment absolutely exists in America.
So like, what do you do if you're a religious minority or even a religious majority who feels like you're losing your monopoly on power? You still want to be able to legislate based on your beliefs, but you don't want to allow other people to do the same. So while your choices are either kind of abide by the church and separation of church and state and just say no one gets to legislate based on their beliefs, or stop people who don't believe the same thing that you do from amalgamating, from going into similar areas, from getting grouped up, or if you see them doing that, then work as hard as you can to legislate against them, to to make sure that their services aren't as good as yours, their schools, their police, their hospitals, which is kind of like the history of America and why you kind of run into so many.
Or just make it hard to get into the country at all.
Or that make it like a Kafkaesque again, just to insert that word into every podcast, which is my goal. But this bureaucratic Kafkaesque.
You have a bet
labyrinth
going with yourself that you can fit in Kafkaesque.
I wasn't even planning on, but like that's just the right word for it. It is.
Whenever I think of bureaucracy,
bureaucratic Kafkaesque.
I always think
system.
Douglas Adams.
That works too.
He seemed to have a very extreme. It's the Brits in general. A lot of their post-apocalyptic stuff was all based around bureaucracy, because they've been living in it for so long. So like Brazil is just basically 1984, but strictly about the bureaucracy side. And then obviously 1984
Douglas
itself,
Adams stuff,
and Douglas Adams, like most of his stuff, obviously Vogons and things like that. So yeah, it's very. I don't know. It'll be the one thing that is happening is there is the way Richard Dawkins put it is that, there's something in the air almost, where every year it seems, or every generation, it seems like the young religious get a little bit more open-minded to other ideas. And I think part of that's probably just technology. And then on top of that, there's less and less religious people. Like the fastest growing religion in America is non-religious. And so, so those things to me give me, you could use the word hope, I guess, but, definitely wishful thinking that we'll see it get to the okay, so here's the way I like to put it. What's his name? Neil deGrasse Tyson. I really liked how he put this. He was saying that if you can't basically peer review some belief that you have, and there's no strong proof for your belief system, then really what you have is kind of a personal belief, and people can't rule other people's like public lives with their personal beliefs. So if you believe that the baby Jesus died for your sins, then that's great and fine and dandy for you. But you can't then go and, like, Gael was saying, make legislation that's based around what the baby Jesus does or doesn't want to govern someone
where
like
there's
me.
No basis for that legislation besides your beliefs. It's not necessarily an intrinsically moral thing or, something in the law, something constitutional.
Well, the other problem is I'm a huge moral relativist anyway, so I don't think that there really is any such thing. Like, I think morality is absolutely just an agreement. And so that's what my contention often with religious people is that they do believe in objective morality, that the universe was created in some kind of state where there is like a perfect essential state of the universe where everyone should be behaving like this. And so anyone outside of that is living in like a state of sin. And, that works as long as you think your model, holds up. But again, you can go back into almost any kind of religious history and see drastic changes with the times. Every religion has basically gotten more and more liberal as time has gone on. Since basically, if you look at like their startups, where a lot of them were killing loads and loads of people in the name of these religions, we don't see that so much anymore because it's just like the whole planet just gets more liberal over time.
Except the Middle East, which stays the same.
Well, it's back and forth though. Well, no, some places have.
I get all your references. Like, you're not slipping any by me, but no, it doesn't. But we're not gonna get. Maybe we'll get into.
No, I know.
It certainly doesn't.
Well, there's some things that.
But there's a perception
in the Middle East.
By the way, I really wish that. I don't mean this. I know that Scoot is a very intelligent and informed person. I just mean in general. I think a lot of people are very ignorant when it comes to the Middle East in general and don't know what's going on. And really
very much.
No, I totally agree. Yeah. Well, part of the problem is that I think that whatever America's up to, example number one being here is like I've said a couple of times. I could probably, it would be hard for me to tell you 5 things I know about Canada, but you guys are like well versed in our political system.
Scott's there, Gael's there. There's two already.
There's two. Yeah, exactly. And it's not that like I have any like, oh fuck Canada. It's just that it's very it just things don't come up a lot, you know. So like you'll hear something about like Justin Trudeau having a gaffe or something, but I couldn't even name who he replaced.
Can you say like fuck? Can you name 5 things about France or like any other? I think the problem with the United States is that
it's so insular.
It is.
It is insular.
It's like North Korea. It's like
some of those places are a little bit more famous though.
In more ways than one.
Some people would say it's worse than North Korea. Would you go that far?
What did Dean Foundry say about the demilitarized zone in 13 Reasons Why? I think he made some comparison where he was like, nah.
It was when Clay was bitching about some bullshit. He's like, I was in the DMZ, motherfucker.
It was Jessica. She's
sorry. Yeah, it was Jess.
This turned into a police state, and he's like, I've been to the DMZ.
Yeah, it's like it's not literally a police state. Come on.
Maybe shut up, Jess. How about that?
But no, it's like the problem. This is something that I've only experienced living in North America, having been to a few countries that aren't North America, and lived in some. Where it's like if you live anywhere, literally anywhere on the planet other than North America, your news sources, the places where you get news from, which is to say the radio, the television, the internet, tend to be located in different countries entirely. Like, so if you live in Africa, for example, you get your news from several different sources. Because not because you're intelligent or whatever, or because you're woke or anything, just because
that's just the main place.
That's just literally the main place. Like in the same way that if you tune into the, it's either NBC or ABC or CBS or whatever, it's kind of the same thing, except because of the area, right? The United States is gigantic. It's a huge country. You compare it to the Europe. It's like you have all these kind of countries in the same place. It's basically the same thing. It's because geographically, when you span the area, this is kind of where people are broadcasting. This is where the companies happen to be founded. So if you're in Africa, you get your news from the BBC, you get your news from Radio France, you get your news from Al Jazeera, you'll get your news from local news. You get your news from different, like literally completely different sources, and all of whom have feeds in different languages. Al Jazeera has an English feed, an Arabic feed, a French feed. BBC has a French feed, an Arabic feed, an English feed, a Spanish feed. Same with Radio France.
Does Fox News have an Arabic feed?
I would love Fox's Arabic feed. I would spearhead that department. If you're listening, Rupert Murdoch, hit me up.
If you're Rupert, get at me.
I'll shoot him an email.
But yeah, no. So just as a consequence of that, you have kind of all of these different news stations who are essentially, because they're competing with each other, they're fact checking each other. They're kind of like no one's getting away with any sort of slant or bias too much in any direction.
Right.
You could argue that some of the European-based ones are a little bit more Eurocentric, which is fine. But in North America, you don't get another perspective. You don't get an outside. You don't listen to. So like when I was actually listening to I was listening to Al Jazeera recently because I don't like Al Jazeera, but I think it's nice to have a different perspective.
I don't like Al Jazeera. I love Al Jazeera.
No, it's like Al Jazeera has its own problems, which I'm not going to get into. They're owned and funded entirely by the state of Qatar, which means they have kind of a more of an Iran-friendly stance on things. But if you already know that going into it, then you know kind of what stories to filter out in what direction. But that's kind of that's more of a conversation to do with media consumption and responsible media consumption than it does.
Right, I could say a lot about that about being in America as well. Yeah.
But yeah, like. But it's just looking at the coverage, it's absolutely insane how the United States is reported in these foreign media, because Trump says something, and he says something insane.
Mm-hmm.
Like very recently he said,
name one.
Like very recently I was watching the live coverage of the explosion that took place in Beirut, and Trump was on a press conference and said, we feel bad for this terrible attack that took, and he was the only person, literally the only person in the world to use the word attack. He called it literally the only person in the world. And then like the next day he was like, a lot of people think it's an attack, some people think it's an attack, some people, it's like he does the thing where it's like, because he doesn't want to admit he's wrong, he goes, no, some people think it's an attack and some people don't.
Well, that's like one of his main go-tos is the fictional a lot of people.
Yeah.
But a lot of people do a lot of things according to him.
Exactly. But in the United States, listening to that, you're like, okay, well, he's just an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about, right? You see the way it's covered, I don't know, by like Radio France or Al Jazeera, and they're like, what did he mean by this? Right? Like they're taking it at face value. They're not going to go into like the fucking. I mean, they do to some extent because everyone knows he's full of shit. But to some extent, they understand. He says, though, my generals told me. So they're like, oh, the Pentagon knows something that we don't. What should we? And they get analysts in, and they start, analyzing, picking apart everything. And it's like people in the United States, a lot of them don't understand just how much shockwaves you create from like every little thing that I see you as a synecdoche here, but like as a country, as individual people who say things on behalf of it. And I wish there was more perspectives, because all you get is this kind of like 3 or 4 channels or networks that basically run everything in the US and just all say the same things to the people who want to hear them.
Well,
just I would kind of different tones, I guess.
You're 100% right. What's nice now, what we're starting to see, and there's kind of 2 parts to this, because it's kind of an answer to one problem, but not another one. The problem it's an answer to is that this thing that we're having is that because of things like YouTube and stuff like that, we're getting a lot of like pirate journalism, where there's people who are like, you know what, I am tired of the bullshit from CNN and whoever, and I'm going to go do my own journalism. And basically now a millennial could get access to like 10 different sources of people. So then you can kind of do that
triangulation.
Yeah, right. And be like, okay, well, these guys are all saying this. The majority of them are saying this. A couple of guys are saying something really crazy, whatever. I can kind of, sift through there. So that part's a benefit. The negative is that it still is all hyper America focused. So you may have a lot of different sources, but they're still all American sources.
But it's still about America at the end of the day.
Yeah, because that's where they grew up too. Like a lot of these kind of like, I know what you're talking about. Like a lot of these people are kind of young millennials who started their own media companies and stuff.
Justice Democrats and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. And they've all, because they've all kind of, this is the soup they swim in, they've grown up in a country where all they've known is American media. And so that's what they're going to create. I really wish there was kind of a network or liberal or independent media kind of source in the United States that covered the world and the United States in the context of world news, rather than kind of the other way around, the world.
Well, part of what's so hard about it,
I feel like headline news kind of used to do that, but stopped. Also, I don't know if headline news exists anymore.
I have no idea who those people are.
HLN, yeah. I feel like they did, but
like
I think
that
they're
90s like roller derby thing that I was like,
headline news was a lot like Roller Jam on TNN, the Nashville network.
Well, I wanted to bring up real quick. You guys ever see In the Loop?
I have not.
I haven't. I've been meaning to, but I have not.
I don't know what it is.
It's the movie extension of the British show The Thick of It, right?
Okay.
And what happens is the very specific plot of this one is that someone says something kind of wishy-washy on air about, I don't foresee any reason for us to have to go to war. And then it just gets picked up. And over the course of the whole movie, all of these minor little stupid gaffes and not saying things quite as, strictly as you would like to, ultimately ends up with them actually having to go to war by the end of, after all of the bureaucracy falls apart.
Right.
And it just made me think of that when you're describing, Trump can go on and say like, oh yeah, that attack. And then you have these other news companies being like, wait a second, what? And then before you know it, there's like a huge conspiracy started over nothing,
Over a single word that, I mean, for all intents and purposes, he just had no idea what he was talking about.
Yeah, he could have said tragedy.
Used what he would call a strong word.
He likes kind of strong words.
I feel like he was just doing it for effect so he could use a strong word. I really don't believe him at all when he says like, my generals told me this. Like, really? You're telling me the Pentagon? Like, come on, dude.
Well, I bet if you off the top of his head asked him to name his generals, he'd maybe go. He'd bat 500 maybe.
He would say David Petraeus, because like that's the only general he knows.
Yeah,
right?
I feel like there's a Petraeus in there, and I don't know, Schwarzkopf.
Well, if you I mean, the thing too is, I'm sure all of you guys, I heard multiple times people talking about attacks. Not defending him, but it's just like it wouldn't surprise me if he had offhand heard that too, so then just ran with it.
I literally hadn't heard anything about an attack. I was following the news very closely, obviously.
Well, not the news. I'm talking about like Twitter.
I'm sure Trump saw something on Twitter.
Okay,
and P.S. Twitter was his generals.
I unfortunately did look at Twitter on that morning because I saw
the morning of the attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God.
Because morning in Canada, obviously it took place closer to the evening in Lebanon. But there was stuff like Hezbollah trending. There was stuff like Israel trending. And people were like, and there were people.
I saw some Hezbollah stuff. Yeah.
There are people calling it a nuke because they saw a mushroom cloud, and like obviously Twitter.
Man, it really did look like a nuke. That was a huge fucking explosion.
It looked like the smallest nuke in the universe, though. The problem is that like big explosions
it was the
just
shape
make
of
mushroom
a nuke.
clouds. The other problem, that's the problem. Those people have this idea that mushroom cloud equals nuke, and it's like no, it's just that
not.
it's a huge
any
explosion.
Well,
and it's also right next to the ocean, so that's why you had all of that evaporation happen so quickly right there, which created that big cloud, and it immediately goes away. If it wasn't. Yeah, it's so goofy.
Yeah, and like people just are very, very quick to start speculating baselessly on what's going on, just based on their gut. Even my sister was guilty of that, and I have to bear in mind that we have family in Beirut. I lived there for most of my life.
Sure.
And it's like even she was like, "Oh my God, it looked like a nuke," and I'm like, let's just relax for 10 seconds.
We don't know it's a nuke.
We don't have information. Exactly. It's like I literally hadn't heard anything, and I was following all the official sources really closely. People on the ground, people on site, analysts, professors. No one was even mentioning the possibility that could have been an attack. All we knew that it was a large amount of explosive material that was stored in a warehouse, and people were trying to find out where it came from and stuff. And we have more information now. But
yeah, because I was hearing like fireworks stuff.
There could still be information that could come out pending an investigation. So even now, a few days later, we still don't have information, and we should still be very vigilant about the way we address it. There could perhaps still have been some foul play regarding how the fire initially got started, but there's absolutely no evidence or information whatsoever that has come out at this point in time to lead us.
Yeah, we've got some basics, but we certainly don't have the details, so wait for details.
It appears that the Lebanese Broadcasting Corporation International said that according to attendees of the Higher Defense Council briefing, the fire was ignited by workers welding a door at a warehouse. Blah, blah, blah. Former port worker told The Guardian there was 30 to 40 nylon bags of fireworks inside the warehouse 12. So... I mean, that's
someone was welding next to a thing of fireworks, and it went
which was next to a thing of ammonium nitrate.
Yeah, that's what LBC. Well, that's probably what they use for the fireworks. But you know what? This is also. I mean, if that's true, this is extremely similar to what happened in 2018 or whatever in Hong Kong.
Oh,
that was wild too.
And that one was way bigger, by the way. It was
bigger, right?
It didn't look real. It didn't look real. Like it was ridiculous how big.
It looked like a Michael Bay job.
Dude, it was like 10 times bigger than anything I'd seen. Like, I couldn't believe how high non-nuclear fire was going. Like, it looked like if you were in an airplane, you would have been like... It is outrageous how big that explosion was. And also just like the insane amount of video we got. Well, that's the thing, too. People were talking about, like, if 9/11 had happened today because it took so long, we would have, like, infinite footage of it.
So much, yeah.
Yeah. It's shocking how much footage there was.
Totally.
Being in 2001, so it's like these days with everyone's cell phones and stuff, like you probably could have mapped out literally the entire thing
completely.
Oh, we literally have people who 24/7 all they do is watch flight paths. They have flight recording software just watches the flight paths of every single airplane, like when planes go missing. Do you remember that one time? I was so impressed by this when I think it was a Russian airplane landed on the United States for unexpectedly or something, or it was Air Force One or something did some weird maneuver, and then someone on Twitter was like, "Hey, there's unmarked plane that's not on any official flight paths is appearing on my radar," and then started tweeting live as it was happening. It's like, holy shit. Imagine that's amazing. First of all, amazing technology that literally just a rando off of Twitter can be like, hey, my flight recorder is just picking up the path of an unidentified plane that is not marked on any official flight logs, but is nevertheless in the air and doing this right now as we talk. Here, I'm going to post regular updates. Imagine, no wonder the NSA is trying to fucking create a police state. It's because they can't have that kind of shit happen.
And I think that no matter, I don't know, there are obviously exceptions, but those people don't take those kinds of jobs. So what's difficult is that almost any group will always try to get as much power as you'll let them, just as much as the corporations will pay you as little as you'll let them. So it's hard because that's part of why I think America blew up.
It's almost like people are greedy.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is that not all of them are, but the ones who aren't don't go work for those companies,
That's the thing.
So what happens is I've always thought that part of what made America work was that we decided to do laissez-faire capitalism, but with a pretty heavy dose of regulation. So we started with the idea of corporations go make as much money as you possibly can, and then we'll tell you where the stop lines are. And so that just
then
allowed
we'll bust you for antitrust.
Exactly, or we'll do whatever you can, and then once you start throwing lead in the water, then we'll come in and be like, okay, hey, don't do
Yeah,
that.
hey,
Blah, blah, blah.
hey, now, come on, stop it.
So I think that that's created this kind of society that we have here where everything is just like more power, more whatever. Whether I have to do it through sneaky means or whatever. So it's just been this nonstop thing. And I think that we're starting to finally get our just desserts on a lot of that. And we're getting the negative sides. It's gotten so bad that finally, like, you can't stuff it anymore. It's kind of like the 2008 or the 2007 housing crash. Should have happened in '07, but it didn't happen until like '08, '09.
Mm-hmm.
Because they just were artificially like pushing this thing, and trying to be like,
because they were waiting for Obama to get elected so they could blame it on him and not Bush.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, seriously. No, I think that they just thought, I don't know. It's hard because the other problem is that to an extent, some of the stuff is true. Like when it comes to our money, like for instance, we have the situation where everyone's broke. Unemployment is through the roof. Like everything is a nightmare, but we keep finding trillions of dollars to give to all these corporations. And
it is funny how that works.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I like how Jimmy Dore puts it. He's like, it's always rugged individualism for us, and then it's socialism for the corporations. So we don't really have a capitalism anymore. We have a corporatocracy.
Also, P.S. I'm doing a podcast with Jimmy Dore in 2 weeks.
No fucking way.
Yes, fucking way.
How did that come up?
He's going on Drunken Peasants on Thursday the 20th, awesome. And I'm on there every Thursday, and sometimes some other days.
Jimmy's great. I like him.
I like him too.
That's fascinating. That's I was like, I thought like Jimmy Dore reached out like, Scoot, we need your political opinions on this.
I mean, I feel like that's the next step.
I sure hope so. Well, tell him I said hi.
I will.
No, it's super funny. Yeah, hey, my friend Chad says hi. But no, that's cool. That's yeah, and that's that was the thing. Like I found him during the primaries because it was just everything. Well, you know what it was? He was actually on a Joe Rogan episode, and I was like, oh, who's this guy? And yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's so hard because I feel like we're also now just turning into kind of like Britain, where it's like the whole thing feels so big and bloated, and it basically just needs to get like ripped down from like the ground up. And the average
guy, you're sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Although maybe it has now, I guess. I don't know.
I don't think it has yet.
No, things could get so much worse.
I don't think it has yet.
Yeah,
I think it get worse.
Yeah. I think, well, one of the things that we're going to see is that like the limitations for what do you call it? We were doing like eviction freezes.
Yeah, like what's going to happen when that's up? Like in October or whatever, when 25% of the country gets evicted?
Yeah, riots. That's what's going to happen, So that's the problem, is that it's like there's some crazy we've gotten away with being far more conservative than a country like us normally gets away with. And for instance, specifically when it comes to like socialist programs. One of the problems we have is that like is it called the NHS? Is it the National Health Service?
That's it.
In England?
Yeah, in England. What's up?
I was gonna say there's a really good if you guys know Richard Osman, he's the host, he's a producer. He's a producer, a British personality comedian.
Oh, dude, it's hilarious, yeah.
From Pointless. And he was rallying for the defense of the word H, because a lot of people in the UK use the word H. And so NHS he argued was the last bastion of the H, because no one says
in England they don't say NHS.
Even I actually met someone from the UK. I met someone who was Irish. I told her, how do you say H? She says H. And I was like, all right, how do you say, the National Health Service?
How do you say your health?
She says NHS. And I'm like, why did you say H there but not H normally? She's like, I don't know. And so
that's why, and punched you in the eye because they were Irish and drunk.
Yeah, I think Richard Osman was onto something there. But anyway, sorry.
Well, there's also like
National Health Service. Yeah,
but they say schedule and they don't say shul. They say school. So there's a bunch of irregularities and.
But those are different words. This is literally saying the letter H.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, some of it is also just like how the onomatopoeia comes off. Like if you say it's hard to say NHS.
You do have to take a real break between the N and the H.
But the point I was bringing up is that one of my roommates was coming at it from an interesting angle, where he was like, part of the thing with the NHS is that they started early enough before all the drugs got super expensive, so that their burden was substantially lower. For us, we've had insane amounts of spikes. And so now when you have like EpiPens that are, $700 and things like that, trying to do like a national health service here would be a nightmare because everything is so expensive that like that money would run out very quickly. So there's things that we kind of like got away with for a really long time. And now if we wanted to start doing some of the fixes, some of the, like we've shot ourselves in the foot with some some of these things, which makes it really difficult to get
It's only expensive because the corporations have hiked the price of it artificially.
100%. Absolutely,
right? So like it is
and
possible.
have been able to do that through unregulated capitalism.
Well, that's what would have to happen. You'd have to have
you would have to
very
you'd
heavy
have to
regulations and come down.
And move from the private sector to the public sector, which no one wants to do. Again, when we go back because of this big government argument, which is completely in my bogus, but I'm not going to get too much into it. But yeah, I mean, it is like that's why people don't want to do that. People believe people who say the private sector does things better, which there are some things that the private sector could do from a qualitative perspective better, but a lot of the reasons you do something in the public sector is because you're not interested necessarily in literally the highest quality thing you can get, but rather you're interested in disseminating whatever it is service or product you're trying to get to a large enough and wide enough kind of demographic, which is kind of the thing about the USP or the post service in the United States. That's kind of the postal service kind of being the whole drama going around there right now. The whole point of it isn't that you're after quality; it's that you're after broadness. You're after the ability to actually disseminate and the ubiquity of what it is that you're trying to do.
Creating like a floor.
Exactly. From a federal perspective, the point is more to capture as many people as possible. Really, that's kind of the first priority. And of course, because the United States lives in a kind of a country where, as we've talked about, the philosophy is very much selfishness and what's mine. Number one, always look out for number one. Then you don't really have a lot of room ideologically for sacrificing any of that what you already have so that other people can get a little bit more. There's no room for that ideologically, and that's unfortunate. I think people maybe should start changing their mind a bit, but there's absolutely no way in a million years a lot of these people are going to ever change their mind, because it's just Randian. It's
some of it is because they won't be alive in a million years as well. We have this issue where a huge portion of these really vile systems are being run by octogenarians. So
they're like, I only got to keep it good for another 10 years, and then who gives a fuck?
Exactly. That's that guy's problem. So, it's that old saying of a nation is great when old men plant trees whose shade they'll never sit under. And that's something we're lacking in spades here, and but a little bit of hope as well, though. We're starting to see more of these there's people like Andrew Yang and such who are trying to communicate with the billionaires and the corporations less antagonistically and try to come up beside them and say, hey, think about this like this, though. It's like if you guys are doing things where you're making more money today, but it's going to basically crash the world economy, then that's not really helping you anyway. So
is that actually the best way even for you?
Exactly right. So I do hear more about people, doing talks and stuff, to corporations, talking about basically like ethical business growth patterns and stuff. It's the same thing with like, if you want to build houses or something, you can't cut all of the trees down in your forest, like that's why we started having that big push for, sustainably grown coffee beans or whatever. And there's a lot to go. I'm not saying that like, oh, cool, we figured it out. But like, these are things I'd never heard about when I was a kid. And it may be because I wasn't asking people these questions, but it's like
there's also like the point that a lot of people don't know what they're called. Like what you're referring to generally is more commonly known as the tragedy of the commons. And Elinor Ostrom actually won the Nobel Prize in economics, like for essentially fixing the problem, or kind of fixing the greater paradox and the problems that were coming out of the problem that was initially posed of the tragedy of the commons, which is oftentimes the idea of having of regulating or managing a public resource so that without depleting it, so that a lot of people are able to partake in it. But you could actually use that same philosophy to solve a lot of other problems that aren't related necessarily to resources. Like
resource based,
you don't need resource based. You can solve other non-resource based problems with it, like choosing, I don't know, like what kind of pizza you're gonna get and shit like that. Like it's weird. It's a kind of a way of thinking, but you have to be able to approach it. But yeah, I would highly encourage anyone listening to this to do some reading up on the tragedy of the commons in general, because I think a little bit of that applied theory in the United States would go a long way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing that's going to help as well is honestly just good old fashioned, like there were a lot of boomers for obvious reason. And
because what are you going to do? Not fuck after the war? Come on.
Yeah, for sure. It's all the silent generation guys. Well, I guess silent generation would have been more their older brothers. It was greatest generation, I guess.
Yeah.
So what happens then is there's so many of them that had a very staunch kind of way of thinking, and they're the ones who kind of built a lot of these, crappy systems. And so the reality is that you give it 10, 15 years, a lot of these cats are going to be retired, if not dead. So it'll be very interesting to kind of see, like, Gen X will basically be the big ones to like replace these guys, and Tulsi Gabbard aged people will hopefully be kind of like the next run of people. But we're also, I don't know, man. I mean, like, what, Obama was in his 40s, right, when he became president? Yep. And I'm pretty sure
late
Clinton
40s?
was too. I think Obama and Clinton were pretty similar in age.
In there, yeah.
Yeah, and what's his face? Bush Jr. was a little older than them, I think, but nothing crazy. But like literally at this point, it was between two septuagenarians and an octogenarian. It's like, what in the fuck is going on?
I remember, because like right now, I think all of Obama, Bush Jr., and Clinton are still younger than either person running for president.
I wouldn't be surprised about that one bit. Yeah, that's a very good point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's driving me crazy. So I'm hoping that we stop that shit, But it also just makes me wonder if that's just a bunch of boomers and older voting for people like them. Because we saw that.
Well, they're certainly going to contribute to that because they're such a big demographic.
There's also
that's what I'm getting at. There was just a lot of them,
There's also the argument that these people are people who have led long, quote unquote, long political careers, and so they've built up a reputation over time, and that makes them more trustworthy, etc. And that's kind of more of a bullshit argument. But I think
it's a great argument for the people who buy into that, which tends to be those people similar in that age. And so what happens is you have all these young people who are completely disenfranchised by it. And I think that's part of why Trump won. It was that there was people who were like, God, I'm so sick of the establishment people that I'll just throw a fireball in there and just see what happens. And
in 2016, there was tons and tons of young people who were like, my better option is Hillary Clinton. Fuck this.
Well, the other problem too is that like, if you were disenfranchised with Obama, then Hillary just represented another 8 years of 4 to 8 years of Obama.
And a much worse Obama. Like, you're not going
to absolutely.
That.
Yeah. And now Biden's the same situation, but now people are like, okay, well, we kind of, we tried the wild card that blew up in our face. So I guess we, now we have to try like lick our wounds and go back to this. The reason I'm so offended is that basically the DNC has said, hey, fuck you on the primary. We're going to do everything we can to force the guy that we really actually want. And now when the general comes, now we're going to tell you
second straight election.
And then we're going to tell you that you have to show up and, oh, well, we need you. You got to show up and vote, during the general. And if you don't vote for our guy, then you're voting for Trump and shame on you. It's like, no, fuck you, dude. Like,
you have good candidates, but why won't you give them to us?
It's a very bitter pill indeed that we need to, that one needs to swallow if they want to go back to the quote unquote status quo. It's interesting because nominating Trump or electing Trump, didn't really have the desired effect that a lot of people wanted, because a lot of people voted for him because, like you said, they were tired of the status quo and they wanted to try to elect someone different to see what would happen.
A maverick.
A lot of
people also had a good platform.
He did. He was an excellent campaigner.
His platform was, we're going to get out of the wars. We're pulling out of the Middle
East. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one that if you,
he was obviously completely full of shit, but he was an excellent campaigner, and I suspect, by the way, that he's going to be very good campaigning this year. I think a lot of people aren't giving him, for lack of a better term, enough credit.
Well, they didn't do it last week.
Well, especially because his opponent is in hiding, so he's going to be running unopposed, basically.
I think a lot of people think Joe has this collection in the bag. I really don't think he does.
I would not call it in the bag.
No, a lot of people that I know, close friends, even think that it's completely busted and Joe has this. I genuinely think Trump is probably the favorite right now.
Well, polls thought Hillary was like 99 to 1%.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing though with him though as well though is that there's a really good, Jimmy Dore was talking about this, how there was this Hicks style guy living in like Virginia or something, and he was like, yeah, I'm not in love with Trump, but Trump is saying a bunch of stuff that I like that he probably is lying about, but Hillary is literally not saying it. So it's like I'm supposed to go out of my way to vote for the person who's telling me to go fuck myself, or vote for a person who's probably lying, but at least they're telling me,
at least he said
I have a chance. Yeah, like at least there's a chance that they might mean what they're saying. And this thing will be good. And I think that's a big one that's tough too, is like the DNC consistently puts these careerists in. And the other problem too is that like Kyle Kalinske puts it great. He's like, we have basically Republicans and then Republican light. And that's kind of the issue that we're in right now, where it's like so much of what the DNC represents is so goddamn similar to the GOP. So we have this problem where, like,
the running joke, and by running joke, I just mean truth in Canada, is that Canada's far right is still left of the Democratic Party in the United States.
Yeah. Well, the truth, though, too, is that, like, our actual left is very left of the Democratic Party. So the problem is we don't actually have a party of the left
Exactly.
anymore.
The real left doesn't really have representation besides Bernie.
Well, and that's
there are progressive candidates who are being elected down ballot.
Yeah, they're progressive candidates, but not on a national level.
And that's helping. And honestly,
but it is helping. I want to say, like, that's not a minor point. It is definitely helping. And I think that I know that a lot of people are very, like, I don't know. It's a tough call, and people felt the same way about Clinton last time.
Well, the primary was a downer.
It is not just a downer, but like a major downer. But I still think that even as somebody who isn't an American, I feel like if I was an American living in Ohio, for example, that I would probably just swallow the pill and vote for Biden. I know a lot of people like aren't going to, which is fine. Like, I think it's a personal choice. I think voting is a personal choice. I think it's an important one. But like, I
respect both decisions.
But yeah, exactly. I think that I don't have like I don't think I can. I don't even think it's my place to tell people that they're wrong for voting a certain way, because I think it's a personal choice.
I don't mind that, though, because the problem is that
I would say, like, if it were me, I would vote for Biden, because
the reason I can
not tolerate another 4 years of Trump.
The reason I could get with someone not voting is that at some point the DNC does need to get told no and get, like, reined in by their constituents.
I will say, sorry, I just want.
It's actually wild that didn't happen after 2016.
Yeah, it is absolutely insane.
It is. It's insane.
But I think one thing that is important is, if you're planning on, quote unquote, not voting, please, like, this is really important. Please still go to the polling station. Spoil your ballot.
Yes.
Like, I don't care. Like eat your ballot. Draw a dick on it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Doesn't matter what. Like, please still go to the polling station.
So it gets counted as a non-vote.
Because there's a difference between not voting, and there's a difference between going and then not voting for a particular candidate or spoiling your ballot. Because when you go to the polling station and there's a piece of paper somewhere that says this person with this age and this gender
showed up to vote. And then what happens usually is politicians just look at those lists and then go, oh, a lot of old people are voting and not a lot of young people are voting. I'm just going to take out my prune juice and start campaigning for old people. Even if you don't want to vote for either candidate, don't vote for either candidate. Literally just draw a dick on your ballot, but please go to the polls
or vote for Joe Jorgensen.
Because everyone in your own blood.
Exactly. If all of the young people did that, like, literally, like I promise you that you're going to start seeing platforms on affordable housing and, raising the minimum wage. And
that's fascinating. That's a great
student loan debt forgiveness. Please, if you're planning on not voting, please still spoil your ballot, at least.
Yes.
Because someone needs to be reported.
Or vote third party as a joke, and then we'll see if it ends up like a movie where the fucking Joe Jorgensen wins. All right, well, cool. Well, that is an hour. And if you guys want to hear more fascinating movie news like you did today, then go ahead.
All the latest from Hollywood.
Honestly, dude, I was putting a list together of like talking points, and none of it's fucking interesting. It's like the only one I'm gonna squeeze out real fast is that Kathleen Kennedy got fired. Thank God. She was the Kevin Feige of Star Wars.
I don't know who Kevin Feige is.
He is the Kevin. He's the Kathleen
Marvel
Kennedy of Marvel.
Yeah, I pronounce his name a different way, but I'm not allowed to say it on the podcast.
I used to hear it that way until it was until I read it, and then I was like, no, it doesn't look quite like that. But yeah, she was the visionary, director of Star Wars, and so theoretically, in part,
like the new ones or whatever.
Yes, of the new ones.
She did all of them.
Well, so she's just like the creative director. So she's the one who so she's grabbing these. That's part of that's what I've been talking about with Disney, is that people are like, oh, Rian Johnson fucked up the 8th movie. But it's like Rian Johnson probably got sent a script that looked like Mad Libs that was like 40% filled out already.
Yeah, Rian Johnson probably did what he could with what he had.
Yes, because they probably said you have to fit X, Y, Z, elemental P. Into the stupid script or whatever, and all these movies feel like that. Like even the stupid Han Solo one had to have a homage from what's his face, but not homage, but it had to have a moment from
cameo or something.
A cameo from fucking what's his face, Darth Maul. And it's like it makes the universe feel tiny, where it's like you can't walk around anywhere without bumping into some guy from the first
love
three
it.
movies.
Yeah,
That's
even though
such
it's all of space, but you
That's
keep
really
running into
good.
the same people.
I never thought of it that way. That's really great.
Yeah, it drives me fucking insane. Like every video I've ever made where I mention Star Wars, like this is the main thing I complain about. In my last video, I was saying how like they need to go genre. They need to start doing westerns and fucking detective stories and like horror movies. That's what I was excited about with, the New Mutants possibly being like a horror movie. And I was like, oh, this could be the thing that takes us down that route. Now, we've seen it with like Mandalorian. Um, so I'm just hoping that hopefully is like in store for things to come, because if we want, I don't know, I'm the kind of person I have written off Star Wars, but it wouldn't be out of the realm for me to like want a good one. If they actually made the franchise good, then I'd be like, oh great, so
I mean, that'd be lovely.
it would be lovely, so her being fired is possibly Disney realize. The other thing is that Disney is under new management anyway. Like Bob Iger isn't the CEO anymore, it's some guy no one knows the name of. So I'm hoping that maybe this is like a shakeup where Disney starts to be like, hey, what if our name represented quality again, for the first time in 50 years? I would say, like, I don't know, Lion King did like Aladdin time period is probably the last time that Disney like represented quality.
Yeah.
Because even like
Lion King 2019, right?
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
It's so funny, dude. All my roommates think that what's his face is a fucking hero. Who's the guy?
Jon Favreau.
Yeah, they do. It just drives me crazy.
The director of The Mandalorian.
That's the one, man. That's the one. It's hard because he has some stuff from the 90s that I think they're like really still fond of.
Swingers, that's a good one.
Yeah,
he was
definitely.
in Daredevil.
Mostly Swingers. Who's he in Daredevil?
He's Matt Murdock's quirky,
comedic
bad guy
that's
sidekick.
who that was.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
And then he was the same thing in Iron Man.
I
think?
No shit, basically.
Good
no,
for
you're
him.
not lying. Yeah, baby, good for him. He's got his thing. So I don't know. It's the same thing. Like, it's weird for me too, because like the Russo brothers made Community, who I'm like a weird fan of, and then they did these big stupid schlocky Avengers movies. And so I'm also trying to be a bit more gracious with people that like, you know what, like I can't just judge them on the worst thing they ever made.
That's very fair.
And I'm glad I didn't do that with Rian Johnson, because I actually think he's extremely talented. I just happen to think that episode 8 is a big pile of shit. But I'm glad I didn't like write him off and not go see Knives Out.
I love Knives Out. Yeah,
that's fantastic.
It's good.
Great movie.
So, all right. Well, I'm not going to hold you guys up any longer. This was a fucking blast, and I guess I'll catch you guys in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'll be excited to talk about the politics of the Baltic region more next time.
Yeah, we'll have 2 weeks more of info. And this is America, so in 2 weeks, I guarantee something crazy is gonna happen.
No, I think it's gonna be pretty quiet the next 2 weeks.
It'll be interesting
to talk about
when all these evictions happen and there's riots and stuff in the street. It'll be interesting. Like,
that's gonna be something.
Talking to you guys like from the bunker.
Yeah, can't wait for whatever the fucking federal army or whatever to descend upon every single state.
Yeah, any of you guys got any open couches? Hanging around. Anyone want to get married?
Yeah, who wants to get married? Can we get three-way gay married, even though 2 of us are straight?
Dude, you know what? That's funny. I never thought about that. Like, what is actually wrong with polygamy? All right, sorry, we're going over time, but
tune in next time for What's Wrong with Polygamy, starring Chad.
I'm back in 2 weeks. Yeah, it's just me. my memoir is about polygamy, and you'll get to hear all about it in 2 weeks' time. So come on back, and love you a long time. Catch you guys later. And all right, have a good day, guys. Bye.